My name is Jesse Martinez. I'm the founder of LSA Global, and we're a nonprofit focused on supporting Latino tech founders as well as careers in tech. I used to be in San Francisco for 25 years. I moved there in '97. As you can tell, I have no grades. And I moved there, and this is an important piece because I moved there in '97 to work for a startup. I was employee 27. We were funded by Sequoia Capital. And in less than a year, we went from startup to part of a public company via 2 acquisitions. So that was my whole interest in the world of tech. Being a native Estonian, an Aggie, ended up in Silicon Valley back in the early days. And so that's important because it allowed me to learn and also be part of the tech ecosystem. And so that really brought me to the work we've been doing all these past 11 years as Latino Startup Alliance is supporting Latino tech founders through tools, resources, and especially warm introductions to investors. And so excited to lead that work now out of the ION in Houston, so I'm back home. And Jan, the executive director for the ION, is here with us today. And thanks to him and Great Houston Partnership and others, especially my mom, for bringing me back to Houston.
Thank you, Mom.
And so on this panel, I have some friends here, excited to share this conversation and talking about the pulse of the Latino tech ecosystem. And again, because I started in '97, here we are in 2023, we're talking about 2% of venture capital going to Latino founders, according to Crunchbase. And then 2% of industry professionals in the VC ecosystem identifies Latinos. And that's according to Latinx VC report. So yes, we're seeing a lot of progress, but the numbers are still very small. So we're making, still a very small dent. And so that's important to note. However, we've also seen the rise of more Latino accelerators, Latino-focused accelerators, right? Like Google for Startups, AWS, Black Ambition. We also have SLAY, the Stanford Latino Entrepreneurship Initiative, helping support some of our Latino tech founders, so kudos to them. And then in addition, we've seen investor community groups such as VC Familia, Latinx VC, and others, Latino venture students as well. And then we also have investor groups such as Cap Table Coalition, Analyst Investors, and also Resolve Ventures. So just a few. If I miss any, please let me know. And so those are important to note because, we've come a long way, but we still have a lot of work to do. And so within this conversation, we'll talk about, okay, what is the state? What is the pulse today? And I'll go ahead and turn it over to Juliana to introduce herself.
Okay, so I'm panel crusher here, which is a great thing because, I always enjoy the opportunity to jump at any opportunity to represent. I'm Juliana Garayzar. I am a native of Spain. I found my Mexican husband in Singapore. And we actually, before being in Europe, then we moved to Houston because he got a job at Shell. And we always, thank you, Shell. We always had a very international career, and when we came to Houston, I was not connected at all, so I decided to do this Kaufman Fellows program for venture capitalists so that I would have this international network in the case I had to move again from Houston to somewhere else where Shell would lead us. And even when I was in this program that is very accepting and very diverse, I felt a huge gap for investors, So I felt like I didn't have the same opportunities as my male counterparts. And I decided to study that a little bit more. So I have to do an end of project fellowship that's like wraps the end of the 2 years. And I decided to focus on the gender gap in investing. And that kind of inspired me to do what I do because I met the founder of Portfolio, which is a platform of funds, and I started investing with them. And the Rising America Fund, Rising America 1 and 2, are the ones that are dedicated to BIPOC and LGBTQ founders, and it's led by 5 women of color, so 2 Latinx, Nora May Cadena, myself, and then 3 African Americans. So it's the only fund there led by 5 women who is actually investing in this area. So we've made amazing investments in Latinx companies like Canela Media, who is like really doing great, and Suma Wealth to represent, and making sure that there's literacy for the Latinx community. very proud of that. And in my other second life, I run a climate tech incubator in Houston. So I'm very passionate about climate, and I'm trying to change the world in these two areas.
Thank you. As we were talking about investor groups and communities, when have Eli introduce himself.
Awesome, thank you. So I want to make a shout out to Frank. Frank, you look sharp. So I'm based in France. I flew in about 1 a.m. today. I made it, but my luggage did not. So this is my travel clothes. So
Waffle.
It's all good, man. It's all good. So I'm Eli Velasquez. I'm the co-founder and managing partner of Investors of Color. We're a national network of Black and Brown accredited investors across the capital stack. So that includes high net worth individuals all the way to athletes and entertainers. My co-founder, he serves as CEO of Black VC. So between he and I, talking about the Black and Brown Coalition, he's from Dallas, I'm from El Paso. So there's a lot of connectivity there. So we get to see the landscape from across a lot of different angles on the capital side. So we have about 800 individuals and organizations in our database. We operate through syndicates. Now we're moving into policy and other elements like that. But I got started building angel networks in El Paso, Lubbock, Texas. Later, I dragged Juliana with me to do a program with the State Department to build angel networks and venture groups in other countries. So we've caused a lot of trouble and a lot of damage, in different parts of the world. But we've seen kind of the lack and access to capital in our community, in our nation, right? And so you think about emerging economies, and we say, how can they get these access to capital networks going in Alexandria, Egypt, or Malaysia, but we can't seem to get it together here in the U.S. And so that's what motivated us to start Investors of Color back in 2018 in stealth mode, and then kick it off in 2021. On the volunteer side, I serve on the board of the Angel Capital Association, as does Juliana. I serve on the board of Hispanics in Philanthropy, and I serve on the board of Founders First Capital, and that provides revenue-based financing. So revenue-based financing, philanthropy, and angel investing gives me a good purview of where the gaps are in the different forms of capital for our community. So I'll stop there.
Thanks, Eli. And so, the other thing we talk about is, funds focused on Latino founders. And so we have, Lat VC, we have Latinx Ventures, we have Inicio, and, a few others. We also talk about emerging fund managers, so new fund managers such as Rachel from Red Light Capital. We have Sergio from in the Bay Area as well, Roble Ventures. And then we have Samara, who's doing her second fund from Chingona Ventures. So awesome to see that in Chicago. And then we have emerging fund managers, and we have a couple in Houston. So I have one sitting next to me, Stacy LaToyson.
Hola, hello everybody. So happy to be here. My name is Stacy LaToyson. I'm the founder and CEO of Dream Big Ventures. And if you were here earlier this morning during the Wealth and Women breakfast, it was a very intriguing conversation about how we can take action. Because, we know the numbers, Elban shared the numbers, and I was so impressed with the head of purpose from NASDAQ. I told her, that's the best title ever. It's so powerful. And so I had a 22-year career in a male-dominated field, oil, the oil business, oil and gas, and it brought me overseas to China and Angola. So I had a few expat assignments there, and often I was the only woman of color, single mom. And I just got to the point where it's like, this next part of my chapter, I want to wake up with purpose. And I decided to make a pivot, especially hearing these daunting numbers of only 2% of VC funds going to women in diverse-led startups. So I decided I'm going to be bold. I've always been a bit of a rebel and a troublemaker. And I started my own company. I mean, this is the only way that we can make a change. And so I started off first, joined Angeles Investors, so I'm a member there. And also I'm an LP with Mendoza Ventures. So I've brought the VC puppy. Maybe some of you know Adrian and Jennifer, and just so proud of them for raising $100 million. And then I'm going to get my own custom VC puppy in Houston next month when they come visit. So I'm trying to share the information with our community. So 2 days ago, I hosted David Olivencia, the CEO of Angeles Investors, just in free, because our community needs to know, they need to see us, they need to know that it's possible, because most of the time we just don't know. I didn't know when I was working in the corporation, living in my bubble, and I was comfortable with my pension and my, vested interest in the stock that I had. And so I was like, okay, I just didn't know about this. And so we have to continue to grow and to learn from each other, share information, invest in one another, because we know how much grit we have. We know that we have so much purchasing power in this country. And so that's why I'm here, and I'm loving it. People are asking me all the time, like, how did you do that? How do you feel about it since you left? And I'm like, freedom. It's freedom to make my own decisions and how I'm going to spend my day, living with purpose and intention. So I'm very happy to be here. Appreciate Jesse's invitation. So excited to share. Juliana and I are also both investors in Portfolio and really great friends back in Houston. And, pleasure to meet you both here today as well. I'll let somebody else speak.
Yeah. And, we all need this, right, for our founders. And so, Luis, thanks for joining us.
Yes, about time. Yes. So this is what happens when you have several speaking engagements plus, the unfortunate situation that's going on with Silicon Valley Bank. But good afternoon, everyone. My name is Luis Martinez. I am the founder and CEO of We The Plug. And so what We The Plug does is we help early stage Black and Latinx entrepreneurs build and scale in the early stage. And we focus on that. A lot of founders don't necessarily understand the fundamental building blocks to actually start a company. So we take an idea, and turn that into an actual company. And then we take them through their first round of capital. And so we do that through various ways. We also run events across the country. We're headquartered in San Diego. And so I also do some VC scouting and also vested interest in funds and that kind of thing. So that's a little bit about me, but definitely interested to discuss the state. And we'll go from there.
Yeah, well, with thank you for your introduction. And let's start with you. What's working?
What is working is that, people are realizing that it's about time they start scrapping, right? And I think a lot of founders, they find the why in the scrapping. And I think that a lot of us don't have enough resources or no resources to actually build something of a technical product unless you have technical expertise. However, if you can build around your skill sets, I find it all the time that founders don't want to build within their skill set. And that's the first place you should start. And so when we first talk to founders, the first thing that we do is take them through an exercise of what their skill sets are, and if that matches what they're trying to build. And then we kind of gear them towards building whatever product or service that gears towards their skill set. I think that's most important, especially when you don't necessarily have the resources to build. So that's working. The venture part,
We'll go back to that.
yeah, so whole other situation. But I think that a lot of folks need to understand what's a venture-backed funded company and what isn't. I think there's a misunderstanding, and too many people are, reading TechCrunch, about the latest and greatest, and not understanding what it takes to actually be a venture-funded company. So, that's my 2 cents.
No, thanks, Luis. Juliana.
Oh, what's working? I think finally we're getting organized, right? It was about time. So I can see, and I know that Eli has the statistics about how many new funds are being created, how many angel groups. Finally, I can see some unicorns happening also that are representing us. And, I'm happy to say that the biggest climate tech company that we have in Greentown is Form Energy with Mateo Jaramillo. All these connections happen because they have their MIT connections. So it's not like they're coming out of nowhere. But I think what really was lacking before for us is of course, the capital, but more than anything, the inspirational capital, right? To believe that a Latinx founder can make it and can bring a unicorn to life is something that is very powerful, because other Latinx founders are going to follow. And I think this inspirational capital is there. I think the network capital, that's the second part of what's missing, is getting there. And now we need to get the real capital there, right? And that's why we're getting those funds. And it's tough, but we're getting there with banks like Wells Fargo, Bank of America, VC Include. I mean, it's a tough thing to also be raising funds for underrepresented founders, but some people are really helping us, and I think we're going to get there. So that's what I think is working. But I really believe that more than anything is to understand what is a business that needs VC, because I think we are really good at doing businesses that grow organically, and we should also be fine with that. I think there's this mentality that you have to be VC backed, but there's a lot of downsides to also be VC backed. So trying to explore other ways, of course, loans, grants, also venture philanthropy, crowdsourcing, all these other things that, unfortunately, when you're a woman or you're a Latinx, you have to explore, because it's not that you have a lot of options, but I think necessity sometimes is the mother of invention. And a lot of Latinx that, couldn't go the VC route and have made it big, now are telling me, you know what, now that when VCs come to me, now that I've passed the valley of death and I'm growing nicely, I tell them, where were you when I needed you? And now I'm happy that, I don't have to basically listen to you because you're not on my cap table. So there's always a silver lining to everything.
There is. Thank you, Liliana. So just for some of you in the audience, a unicorn is a company that reaches $1 billion valuation. And so it's a really big deal in the industry. And so I would say there's probably under 10 Latino-led unicorns in the U.S. And so it's great to hear that there's one at Greentown Labs.
Yep.
I would just add real quick, that's, not the founder's evaluation. So, yes.
Yeah.
I just want to make that clear.
Yeah, and that's true. And I think that's a very good point, because a lot of unicorns give money, but don't give money to the founder, who gets diluted many times. So that's why financial literacy is key, to be able to negotiate with venture so that you don't get diluted down the line, because you might be the founder of a great success story, but still yourself not being a success. So key point there.
Yeah, and just to add also on alignment, right? Ensuring that you're talking to the right investors, so being respectful of the investors, but more importantly, yourself, so that you know who to focus on and who to talk to, and then how much time do you spend with them. So, Eli, what's working?
So I think this is important for founders and businesses in the room. Is when we started Investors of Color in 2018, we started in stealth mode because we just wanted to understand where the high net worth investors of color are. They're very hard to find because they're not actively investing, or they're doing this in very small networks. So we spent a lot of time building trust with different ecosystems, different networks, just trying to understand where they're moving capital. So one, for you as a founder, it's difficult, right? Because we're not just out there advertising that that's what we are. Two, we're not organized. Until more recently, I would say over the last 5 years, what you're starting to see is I'm in Portfolio, I'm in Angeles, I'm in this and that, right? So you're starting to see some crossover, and you're starting to see within the investment community a little bit more coordination, a little bit more coalescing, a little bit more co-investing, which is really, really the important part, because now you all have skin in the game. And so what's important for you as founders, let me add one more statistic. Since 2018, there's about 2,000 funds of under $50 million that were formed, right? So that is a massive, confusing landscape. They're at different ranges, different sizes, different stages, right? Different theses. So for you as a founder, it may be difficult. It's difficult for us, right, to understand who's actually moving capital. So one of the things we learned was, one, they're hard to find. 2, they're not organized. And 3, this is very important, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors out there, right? So there's a lot of headline chasing. Hey, I want to be on the top 15 of whatever, and that's great, but you also have to deploy capital. 2, it's easy to call yourself XYZ Ventures, but you're actually more of an accelerator or you're a consulting company. Those organizations need to be very clear, because that sends a wrong signal to the founders that venture means capital, right? That's how we think about it. So if you're not deploying capital, or you call yourself XYZ Capital Partners, then and if you're not investing, that can send a confusing message. So even within our community, we're still trying to figure out what the footing is. And so it can be a little bit challenging to founders as they're trying to navigate their way through, right? So those are some of the things that are working and some of the things that still present as challenges.
Thank you, Eli. You okay? So Stacy's a newer friend that I met at ION. So again, ION being a connector, right? A hub of innovation. And so I met her when she was working in oil and gas. And then fast forward, she did that career pivot, and now she's an angel investor, LP, emerging fund manager. And so you're early in your journey. So what's working?
Say, showing up, the fact that all of you are here today and absorbing all of this great information, and we're sharing information, and we're connecting, and we're sharing deal flow, and we're, meeting with founders and helping inspire them. The fact that it's all Latinos, here on the panel, and women. It's like, we need to be here so that they're inspired and motivated and see, what we can do when we work together.
I agree. And so thank you for being leaders and pioneers in the space. So let's focus on what's not working, right? Because those are really the hard and tough conversations. And, amongst friends, let's really share that with the audience. And so.
Oh, she's like, hand it over.
So fundraising for emerging fund managers that are Latinx is still super, super difficult. And now I think SVB and everything else going on is not going to help, right? So there's a very strong correlation about the investors and how diverse they are and how diverse are the companies they invest in, So that's the conclusion I got from my research about bridging gaps in investing, right? That means that we have 2 options. Tell Silicon Valley, hire more women, more Latinas, more Latinos, and we can wait for that to happen, and it's not going to happen because people tend to hire people that look like them. Or we can go ahead and take matters into our own hands, okay? And that's what Stacy is doing, that's what Eli is doing, that's what everybody here is doing. And sometimes you can start small, and I think that's the demystifying part that I want to bring here. And I started my career running angel groups. I run the Houston Angel Network. We did a lot of deals with Eli when he was running the Lubbock Angel Network. You don't need to be a Shark Tank to be an angel, okay? You don't need to, you need to be an accredited investor, okay? And then if you're not an accredited investor, there's also tools for you to invest without being an accredited investor. But, we call it the power of the purse for women. We are, and for also Latinx, we are very used to donate. We are huge philanthropists. But the power of investing, and sometimes it could be done through venture philanthropy, donor advised funds, whatever you are thinking about donating, if you can put it in a donor advised fund, you can make it grow, you can help startups, and then when you get it back, you can still donate it. It's not that, but I think there's a lot of activating that we need to do with the Latinx community, because investing in Latinx, consuming in Latinx is a movement. And that's the only thing that is going to help us bridge gaps. So I encourage you to join groups that are educating investors, like Investors of Color or Portfolio or Angeles, any group that is going to help you learn how to invest. okay? Because that's your more powerful tool, investing and consuming in Latinx companies. And then make sure that once you are activated, you activate more people, because we are, I mean, the biggest community, the fastest growing community. We are the biggest consumers. We are the highest consumers of anything that has to do with entertainment. Our buying power is huge, but if you transform it into investing power, then we have no limits.
Can I touch on that next? So I'm gonna give you two sides of the coin of what's not working and why this becomes a very challenging space. So you heard Jennifer and Arturo talk about Latino startups, fastest in formation, hiring, and revenues, right? And so we have a critical mass of companies that could be funded by angel and venture capital. So the Kauffman Foundation says that 90% of small businesses, small businesses under 5 years old create 90% of new jobs, right? So that means that our Latinx companies are creating those new jobs, which are perfect for angel investors and venture investors. The challenge is, though, we only have about 2% of that capital in those individuals looking for those kind of companies, so that we don't have a critical mass of investors that can actively go find those deals and invest in those. There's just not enough money, right, from this asset class being able to be deployed. And what's the old adage? Money flows to people it knows, right? And so we don't have that bias. We don't have that inherent bias to be enough of that to be able to go out to those kind of companies. That's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is policy. And this is an area that as Latinos, we lack significantly. We don't understand how the rules are set up against us. I went to testify before the House Financial Services Committee about a month ago because the SEC, the Securities Exchange Commission, wants to change the rules of what an accredited investor is. So right now, you have to make either $100,000 as an individual or $200,000 or have $1 million of net worth to be an accredited investor. Those rules were set in 1980 and they were set randomly. There was no economic or market analysis to determine that was what a level of sophistication was. So now the SEC is saying, and guess who makes the rules, right? The SEC is saying, let's adjust for inflation. Let's change that to $500,000 and $600,000. When you consider the income and wealth gap within our community, that will absolutely decimate most of our angel group, most of our Latinx angels. I'd be out, okay? And so that would then further hinder what would enable us to move more capital. So policy is also a critical component that needs to be in our conversations around where we start to design new capital structures. And this is what I talk about all the time. Capital is fine, right? Forming new funds is great and whatnot, but then there's capital structures. And that's what Jennifer was talking about with the trampoline example. Because when you look at how white-owned startups form, the capital and the networks will those companies to succeed, right? They will will them to a public exit. They will will them because of the resources and the networks that are available to them, right? Until we are able to get more folks in the game, then that's when we're able to mobilize more successes. And so part of the policy changes that we're advocating for within the ACA and other organizations is to create more pathways for people like us that maybe you don't meet the income threshold, but maybe you're an engineer or you're a lawyer, right? Or you're an accountant, so you have a professional designation. Or maybe we can set up a certification through an exam, right? That's another mechanism that we could do. We could set up a mentorship program where you maybe start through crowdfunding. And so these are all propositions that I've proposed to Congress that need to be pushed right through our networks and through our ecosystem. So those are the things that you should be thinking about, in that it's not just about capital, but it's also about capital structures.
Bravo. Yes. Go out and vote.
Right to your congressperson.
Yes.
Yeah, actually, I think there needs to be a more focus on education. I think there's a lack of education that's going on, especially from the early stage of founders on how to, derive capital for their startups. So one of the things that my company actually specializes in is that. And so what we did is I'm lucky enough and blessed to have a chief operating officer who has been a federal grant writer for 15 years. So one of the underrated tools is actually getting grants from the government. You have grants from the local sector, meaning city governments, state governments, county governments, or municipal, however your state is set up. And then there's federal government grants. And so knowing how to write those grants, knowing what to say on the applications is very important. And
Make
so,
that one of your first hires.
yes. And so I'm lucky enough to have a CEO that does that. We've derived a lot of capital from it and helped many entrepreneurs. And so another thing that I would say is that partnering with universities is another underrated thing. We currently have a partnership with University of California at San Diego. So we're headquartered in San Diego. We have a talent foundry program where we're taking entrepreneurs, minority entrepreneurs primarily, and really giving them resources such as mentorship that they need to scale their business. Sometimes we can have these accelerators and incubators where we can talk to entrepreneurs, to death. But we didn't want to do that. We wanted to bring a different model to the table. And one of those models is really mentorship. So let's say you're having issues with accounting. We want to get you an accountant or a company that actually has done accounting for startups and really get your numbers up to par and make sure your books are squared away. So that's something that's very useful for entrepreneurs and learning, that part. You don't have to know every single thing, but knowing bits and pieces of it is very important. And so the education of that, I can't stress that enough about grants. I can't stress that enough about partnering with universities and also crowdfunding, alternative way to raise capital. And so that way, if you are a venture, if you're thinking about going into the venture part, now you've told them, hey, we scaled X amount of times over a period of time, and now you have the proof. So now it's about, a fit rather than you're too early, because I know we've all heard those three words many, 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 many times. So
You need more traction.
here you go. Misma cosa.
Es cierto.
So I want to say, culturally, our families, we come from humble backgrounds. Many of us are first generation, and a lot of times we don't ask. We're not aggressive enough, and so we have to start, asking for what we want or taking it. Like not just settling for what other people think we should have, and that's why they have that perception out there. But if you look at Silicon Valley Bank and you look at the Enrons, the CEOs, the CFO, they were white males. So, they, and look at and what's his name, Bernie Madoff, but then they don't want to give us an opportunity and give us capital. And look at their track record.
Todos están blanquitos. Okay. All right.
So I always say to anybody who's on my team the same thing. I say, like, your net worth is your network, right? And I think as Latinos, we have never been trained to network, and we are way too humble to put ourselves out there. So as a culture, that hinders us a lot because we will always be the last one to speak, or we won't speak at all. While other people who might be less talented or have a worse business case than us will get the money and will be there. So how to break that cultural barrier, how to speak up, I think is becoming critical. I mean, there's even studies out there that most plane crashes happen with Asian and Latin companies. Because, and that happens because actually when the pilot, the captain is driving, and the co-pilot doesn't dare tell the captain that something is wrong, right? So they'll go and crash because he wouldn't dare sound like, we're gonna crash. They respect authority too much. So actually, aviation companies had to create cultural programs to deactivate that because it was creating that. So I think culturally, we need to step up and speak up because nobody else is gonna do it for us.
The same thing happened at NASA with the Challenger. When they did looked back at the lessons learned, and that's the same thing. They saw that they did it anyway.
Can I double down on what Luis said? So from the capital side, about $4 trillion is being deployed through the federal government because of the pandemic. Within the EDA, the gentleman that heads it went from a $3 million budget to a $30 million budget and increasing, right? MBDA, NIH, NSF, I mean, we could go on and on. The Treasury Department 10x'd a program that Obama launched. It was a $1 billion program 10 years ago to develop new venture and lending programs across all states. Biden 10x, that's a $10 billion program called the State Small Business Credit Initiative. You should be writing that down. State Small Business Credit Initiative. Why? Because that's where capital is flowing, right? So your state economic development office is getting no less than $56 million, okay, to go and deploy capital through venture programs and lending programs. And there is a significant mandate to deploy it towards diverse founders, both on the emerging manager side and on the small business side. So if you are not learning about State Small Business Credit Initiative, right, that's another element of where capital needs to be deployed. They're still trying to deploy the $1 billion from 10 years ago. So what do you think is going to happen with the $10 billion that's going to be going out the door now? So that money is going to go somewhere, right? That money is going to go somewhere. And as a community, we need to be organized, we need to be methodical, we need to be thoughtful about how we put our business plans together, how we approach our financiers, right? And how we go out and raise that capital.
Thank you, Eli. And Luis, thank you for the policy and the grant stuff. Veronica, did you write that down? So I wanted to give a shout out to Veronica, another emerging fund manager, Latina, back in Houston after working for Lyft. And she's also supporting policy and research that we're doing in Houston. So thank you for bringing that point up. So speaking about culture, let's ask some questions. So, all right, we're going to open it up to questions. I see one hand over there.
Hello. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. Two things to the point about speaking up. There's a little bit of cultural bias with Latinx. We know that as well. And there's a code on how to speak efficiently or effectively in this group of people that don't look like us. So what are your recommendations to help founders to navigate the politics within this landscape? Thank you.
Yeah, I could give a quick example. Know your value, know what you bring to the table, know something unique that they don't have that you bring. So I was recently named as an advisory board member of a software company and venture studio called SoftTech. And it's because they were recruiting me to be a limited partner. And I was like, well, looking through their deck and just noticed that it's all males on their leadership team. It's all males on their advisory board. So I noticed a gap there that, they didn't notice themselves. So I spoke up and I said, hey, I think this would be a great opportunity for you to get tapped into the Latino community, for women, and you need some more diversity on your advisory board. So they were like, you know what? That's brilliant. Yes, we'd love for you to join our team. So, so I'm there, and so that's how.
So to me, I would say data is the biggest weapon against bias. Okay, so know your data. When you're speaking about something, know your numbers, know where you're headed, and try to deactivate that bias because you speak too loud or you laugh too much or you speak too much with your hands, and that makes you not fit the mold, or you interrupt and suddenly they feel like you're super disrespectful. All of that, I think you can deactivate by being as objective as possible about everything. Because the bias from the investor side, and I'm talking even from female investors that are judging a company by women or Latinx, is, when there's a white man presenting, they are all confirmation questions. So everything you ask is like, well, when you get to your 100 million valuation, what's going to happen? But when you're actually asking women or Latinx, it's more like, is it really going to happen? So it's more like control questions, and you have to prove with your answer that you're going to get there, right? So I think many of us are sometimes too scared of numbers, but I think they are our biggest allies. So know your numbers, not only about your company and your projections, but also about statistics on how things are happening, how we need to get somewhere else, and try to deactivate these questions that in general are based on their own preconceptions on who you are.
One of the things that I formed about 12 angel groups so far, and people say, what's the advice that you would give to somebody who wants to form an angel group? My number one advice is don't start an angel group, right? And then the other adage is everybody wants a fund until they have one.
Yeah.
Because you're managing money. So this is the investor mindset. You're managing money. So you're responsible because some ultra high net worth individuals giving you money, or they're entrusting you with X, Y, and Z. So ultimately what we are beholden to is making money, right? So when you are discussing when you walk in the room, you want to talk about the economic opportunity, right? And to Juliana's point, when you're backing that up with a clear problem statement, clear value proposition, clear market analysis, clear economic opportunity, clear exit, and oh, by the way, this is what the team looks like. It looks like this, right? Why? Because diversity produces 30% greater returns than non-diverse teams, right? So those are the things you need to be walking in the room with to say, you're about to make a lot of money because you're making a smart investment, right? And that's as objective and as clear as it needs to be, because now you're speaking the same language.
I'll just tell a quick story just to sum everything up. So I live in San Diego, and I'm an East Coast person. I grew up in Brooklyn. So
Brooklyn.
And shout out, appreciate that. So anywhere I know they plays about San Diego geography, we're right next to Tijuana, and so we do a lot of cross-border collaborations with entrepreneurs in Tijuana. So we were doing this function event, and we were doing it at a very public place, and so a young lady was asking me directions to somewhere, and I kind of knew where the place was. I kind of was talking to her in Spanish. And so I'm telling her the directions, this way, blah, blah, blah. So I turn around, and I mean, it looked like this whole room was just looking at me. Like, it was just, everyone was like eyeballs. I didn't know you speak Spanish. I didn't know you. And I'm just like, my name is right there. I mean,
Martinez.
like, I have to, my name might as well be John Brown. I mean, how many people in here know somebody named Luis Martinez? My point exactly. So, that goes to show that we come in all shapes and colors inside. So, that's the moral of the story.
Love it. I love it.
Another question?
Well, first, good afternoon, and thank you all so much for your time. And I know there's busy, a lot going on, so we definitely appreciate you taking the time to be here. Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Ward Jr. I lead Austin Urban Technology Movement, and we help Blacks and Hispanic get inside the tech space. A lot of the topics and things I'm hearing, one of the themes I see is like transparency, right? Like, we just don't talk enough. We don't share enough. We don't show the value of X, Y, Z. So how do we create a playbook that allows us to have a community of more transparency so that we can know all the latest, all the trends, what not to do? How do we lean in that? So 10, 15 years from now, we're having a different conversation. Oh, and I'll say on an individual level, right? Like, what can we as individual people do?
So I can start, and I think that leads to everything. It doesn't have to be only for our community. I think the challenges that we're facing in the world, like with climate, with bridging gaps that are widening, with everything, there's no time for us to compete anymore, right? And I really think that is important to understand about open innovation that is basically transparency, and that a rising tide lifts all boats, okay? And I think that that's something that Silicon Valley is more like sharing, but with their own kind, right? So we need to create the same thing for the Latinx community, saying like, if I succeed, I need to help succeed the rest because it's my responsibility. And I think that as Latinos, I see a lot of people who got here as immigrants, and I'm like very happy to close the door behind them. And so like, there's too many immigrants here. And I'm like, well, how did you get here in the first place, right? So understanding that the pie gets bigger together, and that, the pie can be unlimited. And if you just close your network, you close your education, you close what you know, and you don't share it, you're not going to make the pie bigger. So there's not a limit to the pie. We can all grow together. And the Latinx community has the potential to grow the most, because we're going to become the majority population. And that's going to mean a lot of wealth that we can create if we're able to share. So that sharing mentality is something that we're not used to, but it pays back. It pays forward, it pays back. It's the right way to do it, and I think we should embrace it.
I want to touch on that because I think it's important that we continue to input into the data, because the data drives the narrative, right? So Jenny was talking about what are the top 3 things that we should get behind. Well, the data is going to drive that, because if we start seeing patterns emerge across our different communities, our ecosystems, right? Because we're all different in population size, and this one's stronger in this industry over the other. But over time, the data is going to start to rise what the common issues are, which then help drive our agenda, our policy agenda, right? Well, 3.2 trillion. And so these are the numbers that keep emerging over and over, which will help drive that. That's 1. 2, on the angel side, that playbook is slowly being written, and it's been tried time and time again. Juliana and I continue to push on syndication. How do we pull these networks together to start sharing deals at a much higher level versus keeping them hyper-localized, right? So there's a platform now for women, platform for clean tech, platform for impact. We're trying to design one for diversity. So there's areas there, but there's still challenges. But literally, there's a playbook where it's like, here's how you share these deals across these different ecosystems. So those are areas that we're also trying to promote and push. And then the last part, within the emerging fund manager community, that's sort of still trying to find its footing. But I will tell you, they're working together, right? So we know each other, we run into each other, we're cordial with each other. So we're trying to find what that playbook looks like. But that's a really important concept and initiative that we push forward.
Okay, well, I think that's all we have. So on behalf of the Innovation Hub, I want to thank my amazing panelists, Juliana, Stacy, Eli, and Luis. Thank you for being with us today and sharing your insights, knowledge, and especially the drive to help support this Latinx Tech. That's it.